I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, and everybody's probably heard something about my best buddy, Harry Gresser Jr. And we got up before dawn in the morning, and you know, the first part of November like that, why back then the northern flights were at their best, flying back from Canada and so forth, south. Well, we like to hunt in a place called Rice Lake up here. Here's Winnebago, Minnesota. Here's Delavan, Minnesota. But this is the road that we take out of Blue Earth and go up this way. Well, like I say, it was before dawn in the morning. We got up there, parked the car in this pasture and so forth that the farmer let us use, and went down to the duck boat. Junior's dad had the duck boat always up there in hunting season. And I got out onto the water, set our decoys up, and weren't set up very long and so forth, and she started to mist pretty good and so forth. And wind started to pick up. And so we sat there and sat there. I can't remember whether we did get a few shots or not, but anyway, that's beside the point. But then it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, a little bit before maybe, that all of that stuff turned to heavy, wet snow, and the winds were 40 plus miles an hour. And so we thought, we're going to have some problems, so we better take off. So we grabbed all our decoys, put them into the boat again, headed back to where the car was parked. And by the time we got back there, why, the wind had blown and then drifted enough and so forth, so there was no way we were going to get into the car. And of course, back then, you know, there weren't many gas tanks that were ever filled. And so we figured, oops, we better find a place to stay. So we had our hip boots on, and thank God we did. And so we started walking, and the wind was so strong that, well, you heard about back then there was lots of turkeys and all kinds of cattle that froze their noses and died and what have you. And you couldn't walk into it. So we were basically walking backwards. And we went this whole trail down to this road here, and we stopped there and decided, well, now wait a minute, shall we go into Winnebago or Delavan? And we looked at each other, well, we don't know a damn soul there that, you know, would put us up and so forth. So it's better to head south rather than face that doggone northwest wind. So we walked backwards, and the wind would sometimes be so strong it would blow you off your feet on gravel roads, that's all there was back then, and blow you off your feet and down into the ditch. And so you'd crawl back up onto the road and get up on your feet and start trudging along again. And you couldn't see, well, there's some of the stories in the book about that too. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And anybody that was still in a car and so forth could not see the hood ornament that they had on cars back then at all. And some of those people were driving along gravel roads because the weeds were still high enough so they could stay just on that side of the weeds and hope that they would get to where they wanted to go. But anyway, we walked backwards this distance, and when we got to this curve here, I recognized it. And I said, say, so-and-so lives here, I can't remember the name. And this was a whole bunch of trees, grove of trees that was on that corner. And the house was back on the inner side of those trees. And I said, well, maybe, by gosh, we can make it in there and get a safe place. So I said, okay, we'll go into the woods together. We'll get to the other side of the woods. And I got over there, and I said to Harry, I said, all right, now, you stay here. I'm going to walk where I think the house is, and if I find it, I'll holler at you, and then you come and join me. Well, I did find the side of the house, and he came, and so we felt our way around the side of the house to the back door, and we knocked on the back door, and this guy's wife came to the door first, And she looked and gasped and so forth. She said, what in the world are you doing out in weather like this? Well, and he walked up behind her and he says, Hollace Sandholm, God, you know. And I said, well, we're going to go duck hunting up there on Rice Lake. I said, we're trying to get our way back to town. And he said, oh, geez. Well, then he pointed to a sign, and it was a quarantine sign, and they were quarantined for diphtheria. And he said, man, I don't think you should risk, you know, coming in the house and staying with us. But he says, you could certainly go down and stay in the barn, where you got a lot of cattle, you know, and it's hay and so forth and so on, until he says, well, back then communication was such there wasn't any weather reports or anything going on. And like I say, the wind was blowing so darn bad that they weren't going to stand in that door for any longer than they had to. And I said, well, okay, you know. So they slammed the door, and we stood there in the step and so forth and looked at each other and looked, and I said, oh, Jesus. I said, barn here, barn there, and so forth. If we miss that barn and we're out in the goddamn plowed fields or whatever and so forth, we're done for. And I said, I don't think we should even risk trying to find that barn. It's too far off. So anyway, I said, let's get back on the road and see what we can run into the rest of the way down. And so felt our way around the house again, back through the woods and up onto the road, and trudged the rest of this way. He's reached a mile down to old Highway 16, which is the road that runs across Minnesota and whole United States going east and west out of Chicago.
Yeah, because obviously that freeway didn't exist.
No, there was no I-90 there, no way. And there was a transformer on that corner there, and I knew that you couldn't see the transformer, but I knew, of course, it was a dead end there, and we had to go right, of course, into town. And so we walked backwards again, because then you were walking right into it. And by the time you got to the edge of town, here's the Blue Earth River Valley and so forth. So it went down, got into the river valley before you got up in the higher ground that was actually the city of Blue Earth. But we made it that far, and I had to walk a little further than Harry did to get to his place, so he left me on 7th Street and walked over 2 blocks to 5th Street and got home. And I had to go down to, I think it was 10th or 11th anyway. And my brother had been home all day because my folks had gone up to Mankato shopping. And then during the course of the day, they had called my brother and said that there's no way that they're letting any traffic out of Mankato. So we're stuck here. And one of the last things that she commented about, she says, is Holly home? And he says, no. She says, oh my God. Just because they had some radio stuff and so forth, finding out how really bad it was there in Mankato. And anyway, we started out about 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, and got here. It was between a little after 4, between around 4:30 in the afternoon that I got home.
What do you figure that distance is about?
A little over 10, 11 miles.
Yeah, so
backwards, 99% of the way. And when I came in, he says, oh God, he says, yeah, he says, Mom and Dad are stuck up in Mankato too, and so forth. And he says, I don't know whether they're going to try and call back or not, but he says, I'm sure they're worried sick about you. And anyway, when this finally ended and so forth, it was, and you read all the other stories about people and so forth, the smartest thing we could have ever done was keep our hip boots on, because when that heavy snow would hit and freeze on the side, there were a lot of other people, you know, that just had pants, and they didn't make it. They couldn't move. They got so stiff that some of them told about even their coats. You could take them off and stand them, you know, instead of even worry about hanging them on a hook. They were so darn stiff with that. But at least with the hip boots on, you had enough movement there, and the surface of that rubber on the outside of the hip boot would break that loose and so forth, so it would fall down in the road so that at least you could keep going. And like I say, that's the smartest thing we certainly did during that whole time.
I think that book you were reading said too that throughout the Midwest, there was over 100 and some people that died, and like 59 or something like that in Minnesota, and over half of those were duck hunters.
Yeah, it was like I say, the duck weekend and so forth for all of the hunters. So-
Oh, it was a holiday because of the.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Or-
Okay,